Oh shit, we're doing trigger warnings? Alright, so I'm a white cis male and I'm talking. I think that triggers some people.
The 1970s saw steady growth in the number of women pursuing degrees in classically male-dominated fields.
Wait, how the fuck are these two classically male-dominated fields if there's already 40% women graduating from them?
Including computer science, which was trending towards parity with men before it suddenly reversed directions in the early 80s.
It wasn't trending towards parity, it was just trending upwards. How do you know where it was gonna stop? Could it have been more than 50? If the trend continued for another decade, it would have looked like this. Then one more decade, it would have looked like this. There's no reason it would have stopped at 50, you know?
This was not an isolated incident. Several other degrees saw drops or plateaus around the same time.
No, they didn't. They all kept growing. Take another look at the graphs. The only one that drops in the 80s is the blue one, but then it starts growing again. So, as you can see, all of the arrows except for the red one is actually pointing upwards. Your graph doesn't work. Look at the top one, communications and journalism. There's over 60% women. That ain't fucking male dominated.
The 80s as a whole saw a culture-wide pushback against the women's lib movements of the 60s and 70s. To quote Susan Faludi, by the end of the decade, 80 to 95% of women said they had suffered from job discrimination and unequal pay.
95% of women in the 80s suffered from unequal pay. So the Equal Pay Act of 1963 never happened. Businesses weren't forced into equal pay for equal work. That never happened. There was a pushback against it, apparently. And then we just started discriminating against women again, paying them less for the same work because of Reagan and the 80s. Alright.
Sex discrimination charges filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission rose nearly 25% in the Reagan years.
How is that a bad thing? That's fucking awesome. 25% more charges filed? Not 25% more actual discrimination, mind you. The discrimination was probably going down. It's just that women realized that they had the same rights as everybody else. They asserted those rights when they were discriminated against and took action against it. How is that a bad thing? And clearly, women filing charges with an agency that was set up in response to the civil rights and women's rights movements. That's evidence that there was pushback against said movements. Because Reagan.
And charges of general harassment directed at working women more than doubled.
Are you really saying that there was more workplace harassment taking place in the 80s than previously? The 80s had more workplace harassment than the 60s? The 50s? The 40s? The 30s? The culture was shifting, and things that was previously perfectly acceptable, like a boss pinching his secretary's butt, and the secretary was just supposed to giggle and go along with it, just weren't acceptable anymore. The women's rights movement had finally made it so that everybody saw females as autonomous individuals. They had rights and they needed to be respected. Their boundaries needed to be respected and their sexuality needed to be respected. This in turn led to laws being put in place to prevent workplace harassment.
Sexual harassment is against the law.
Word around the office is you've got a fat cock.
And thus, more cases were reported, because the laws were expanded. But no, it's probably because Reagan.
Many women were leaving tech because tech was becoming hostile towards them.
Was it though? Are you just guessing now, or you're just making things up?
But this morphed into the adage that women don't like computers and girls don't play games. But women have never been absent from computer science.
They haven't? So what the fuck is this then? Yeah, I know you mean before this.
Female programmers go all the way back to 1840, and before games were codified as an industry of men making products for boys, a number of female designers were household names.
Household names? Yeah, right. They made adventure games. You can't even shoot some niggas in that. Why the fuck would anyone want to play that? That shit's gay as fuck. No, but really, they did make adventure games. Really good ones. I don't really get it though. It's not like there aren't female developers these days. Especially indie ones, there's quite a few. There's a thriving industry of women making games for women. Just look at the hidden objects games. Women make the majority of them and women play the majority of them. The games industry is way too diverse to just call it men making games for kids. That's kinda rude. When you say that, aren't you just marginalizing all developers who aren't white cis males? I thought that was a really bad thing for progressives to do. Maybe you should check yourself, man. Think about what you're saying.